Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, July 14th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. On today's episode, Variety's Gene Mattis brings us an update on where things stand for Paramount Skydance after 12 state attorney generals got together to sue to stop the company's takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery. And then we have an enlightening conversation with Columbia University Law School professor Eric Talley, who explains what power the state AGs have in this equation and where this case is likely going, which is negotiations with Team Ellison on some concessions to the marketplace to remove this legal roadblock to closing the $110 billion transaction. But before we get to all of that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Well, hallowed be thy name. Legendary UK heavy metal outfit Iron Maiden has sold a 50% stake in its master music rights and the band's name, image, and likeness. It's been sold to Pop House, an investment firm founded by ABBA member Bjorn Ulvaeus. Variety has unveiled this year's Power of Young Hollywood honorees. Drum roll, please. On the list this year is Tate McRae and Somber, and actors Tyreek Withers and Malachi Barton. Our annual event to celebrate this year's honorees and our Power of Young Hollywood Impact List participants will be held on August 5th in Los Angeles. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Gene Mattis, who covers legal and public policy for Variety, brings us up to speed on what happened with the state's attorneys general on Monday for Paramount Skydance. And, in fact, since we recorded this last night, it has come to pass that the state AGs have filed for a temporary injunction to block the merger, as Gene predicted. Gene Mattis, thank you so much for being on top of the big story of the day. 12 state attorney generals get together to sue to block Paramount Skydance from buying Warner Brothers Discovery. It's a big deal.
Yeah, a huge deal.
It doesn't happen every day. And of course, led by California's own Rob Bonta, this coalition of a dozen state attorney general, all blue states, has been signaling almost with a neon sign that they are going to do this. So that wasn't a surprise. This morning, when you finally got the complaint and everything was finally official, what surprised you, Gene, in terms of the approach taken by this coalition of AGs?
I think what was most interesting or surprising probably was the specific markets that we're talking about. When you're pursuing an antitrust case, you have to define what market you think the competition is affected in. And the markets specifically that we're talking about here are wide release theatrical distribution. Okay, fine. We all know what that is. But then the other one is blockbuster theatrical distribution, which is a subset, obviously, of wide release, and it's sort of like the biggest tentpole movies. Well, is that actually a market? And I think that's going to be an interesting question going forward that a judge will have to decide is like, is that narrow definition really something that you can say, well, they've got monopolistic control over it where it could actually affect ticket prices? And then the other one is basic cable. And what's interesting about that is that we really hadn't thought that much about it because basic cable is sort of this shrinking ice cube. But the argument is Paramount and Warner Brothers are the number 2 and number 3 in basic cable channels. And if you combine them, then that's bad for the cable companies and it's bad for satellite providers.
Those are two interesting areas to focus on because, of course, the film side has definitely been a live wire in all of the merger discussions, of course, back when Netflix was in the picture for Warner Brothers Discovery. So that's not a surprise, but the basic cable TV channel business is kind of a surprise because ask anyone on Wall Street or in the industry, it is a significant business today, but it's a melting ice cube. And so it seems a strange place to really focus a antitrust argument rather than what is clearly the future of the multi-channel content universe, which is streaming. And you're saying that there's little to no discussion of streaming, of the combination of HBO Max and Paramount Plus, no discussion of the combination of all that under one roof?
Paramount, in its defense, was saying this is actually doing the work of Netflix because it prevents us from presenting a real competitive challenge to Netflix by combining all of these much smaller streaming entities. And so, Paramount would very much like to have the streaming conversation, and the states are basically trying to make it a theatrical and basic cable conversation.
How did they define what a blockbuster is specifically in the marketplace?
It doesn't seem like it's really defined. They talk about blockbusters, they talk about event films, they use the term tentpole, but there is some stuff that is redacted because they've done some investigation and haven't gotten permission to disclose it yet. So maybe more will be forthcoming later on.
Well, Gene, there is so much to unpack here, and we are going to hear some really interesting perspective from Columbia University law professor Eric Talley in just a moment. Let me just ask you, this was filed in federal court in San Francisco. When do you think a judge will make the preliminary decision on whatever each side is asking for?
I think the states are going to have to ask for an injunction to prevent the merger from closing. And that could go before a judge within the next couple of weeks to a month, I would say. And then depending on how that goes, we might get an appeal, we might go into negotiations. It's sort of hard to predict from that point on.
This would all seem like such a long shot, but we have a months-old example here at the ready in Nexstar and Tegna, and to my surprise, that a smaller coalition of state AGs came together to oppose that merger, and they did get an injunction, and they really did stop those two companies from completing their merger, much to the outrage of both Nexstar and Tegna. It's very unpredictable. Gene, thank you so much for being vigilant on your beat.
Happy to do it.
And now we turn to Columbia University Law School professor Eric Talley. Talley breaks down the power that the state AGs have in fighting to block or at least delay the Paramount-Warner Brothers takeover. We talk about where this is all going, which he thinks is negotiations on concessions that Paramount can offer to make this problem go away. Eric Talley, professor of law at Columbia Law School, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Cynthia.
Well, all of Hollywood is trying to figure out what's going on. We knew for a while that 12 state attorneys general were getting together to oppose Paramount Skydance's takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery. This has been a deal much discussed in the entertainment industry, but this is becoming a national story and lots of concerns about the impact of consolidation on the marketplace for consumers. That's certainly what the state AGs are laser focused on, is the marketplace for consumers. Professor Talley, tell me what you think the significance of this action of these 12 states getting together. What does this mean for this deal?
It is a significant roadblock for this deal. Will it necessarily shut the deal down entirely? That remains to be seen. But when a large number of state attorneys general who do have authority to enforce U.S. antitrust laws, it's not just the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission, get together and file a lawsuit like this, it absolutely grabs attention, not only of the public and the press, but also of judges. The complaint itself is also facially pretty plausible, and it fits very comfortably into a lot of similar sorts of complaints that have been filed both in media industries and others. So this is a roadblock that I think Paramount Skydance and David Ellison and Warner Brothers Discovery are going to have to contend with, and it may well place a significant sort of delaying role, if not a kneecapping role on this deal.
This deal has been wrapped up in politics at a level that you don't usually see seeping into media M&A, for sure, because of the Ellison family and the Trump administration. What's also interesting about the state AG's action is that we have a very handy example that's barely months old with Nexstar and Tegna, and that's a station group merger. To my surprise, there were also state AGs that opposed that and were able to get an injunction. They were able to stop Nexstar and Tegna from moving forward with the integration. If you are Paramount Skydance's attorneys, does the fact that Nexstar and Tegna has been held up, does that make you nervous?
I think it absolutely does. It seems to me over the last couple of years, the memo has gotten lost in the file that state attorneys general have very much the same ability to challenge a merger under the Clayton Act as does the federal government. And if the federal government chooses for whatever reason, be it political, be it substantive, be it pragmatic, be it budgetary, not to challenge a deal, state attorneys general can and do go forward. This was just one deal that state attorneys general went forward on. I think Albertsons Kroger, which is in the grocery business, was another. These horizontal mergers between two companies that are historically competitors with one another, those historically have been the most challengeable. So on some level, if you look at this against the arc of history, it's wholly unsurprising that someone would come forward and challenge this transaction. Maybe a little surprising that it wasn't the federal government, but here we are in 2026 and politics has taken over a lot of those decisions.
Would you say that in the last couple of years you've seen a more aggressive stance in general from attorneys general?
I think so. There's been a sense in which the attorneys general will sort of come in places where one of two things is gonna occur. One, the federal government, for whatever reason, has gotten distracted or has decided not to pay attention to a particular case. And that clearly was one of the factors here. I think the other factor, quite frankly, is this is almost an irresistible complaint for any Democratic Party attorney general or governor to file, right? This was kind of a notoriously combative type of a takeover in which a lot of, certainly California, but other parts of the United States sort of felt that there was a genuine question about whether media markets were going to get skewed in a particular direction. People were paying attention to it. For anyone that was maybe running for office in an election year with a platform of fighting against the Trump administration and the Democratic Party, this is kind of a no-lose political situation. So you combine what seems to be a pretty facially valid complaint with a very opportune political moment to file it. And not only is it unsurprising that they would sort of come forward and do it, and multiple states would do it, but my sense is that these AGs are largely going to dig in their heels on this, and they're not going to settle for a relatively toothless or mild settlement, and they probably are not going to want to settle at all before Election Day.
Wow. There's been a brewing effort within the creative community to use this merger as a moment to really try to push for some meaningful conditions, some set aside, some kind of commitment from the enlarged company that it will order an X percentage amount of content from wholly independent outlets, or some sort of percentage-based or some kind of set-aside similar to what you see in Europe. People see this as a moment. And we got a statement from the Producers Guild of America earlier today after the AG's lawsuit that all but says, this is what we're going to do. Do you think that has a chance in this environment?
Yeah, it may have a chance. Like, one of the questions that is almost certainly going to ensue right now, my guess is that the AGs are going to be successful in getting a judge, at least temporarily, to enjoin this transaction from closing until there's a little bit more work that's done in the discovery part of this case. Should settlement negotiations ensue, then those settlement negotiations can take any number of forms, but possibly some of these concessions could be part of those settlement negotiations. And then it'll be kind of an interesting, almost political calculus about whether the proponents of some of these concessions that have been at work for months now trying to put them into place are going to run headlong into the electoral aspirations of some of the AGs and governors that are pushing this case forward. It would be kind of an interesting moment if this case were to reach a settlement that included some of those protections. That probably would cast a forward-looking shadow to additional M&A transactions down the road. At this stage, it's very, very early in the game, and the longer that this ends up being hung up in this lawsuit, the more expensive it is to Paramount Skydance. One of the things that is kind of hidden in the details of the agreement is that they have agreed to pay what is known as a ticking fee if this deal does not close by around September of this year. And I've got to tell you, last time I did my math on this, Cynthia, September occurs before November, which is when the elections are taking place. So I think it's quite likely that we're going to see a little bit of a delay game going on, at least until the November elections. To the extent that antitrust law ends up fighting a proxy war for larger questions that are sort of bubbling up, one that's very, very hard to ignore right now is the question of how does the federal government interact with and control the media? And it's not lost on anyone. I think that Paramount, Skydance, and CBS have been moving in a particular direction. Many of the assets of Warner Brothers Discovery, notably CNN, has not been moving in that same direction. And so I think in some level, whether you distill this as an antitrust battle or almost like a battle for the cultural hearts and minds of the American and state public, this almost certainly is going to be playing at least a subtextual role in the antitrust case as well.
And then we can even throw in the UK, where we don't know exactly what that's going to happen. I know this, UK regulatory reviews do not move quickly. And to the point of that ticking fee, even for the Ellison family's deep pockets, a promise to pay about $6 million a day, that's going to add up. Professor Talley, anything else we should be thinking about as we try to understand all this?
Now that this AG challenge has fallen in the United States, has basically moving forward in the United States, whether some of the other competition authorities around the globe are going to be emboldened by it, and whether this is going to actually in some ways have a pile-on effect that could spell real trouble for the Paramount Skydance acquisition. It's not just trying to dispose of or dispense with the AG complaint, but the UK authorities, the European authorities, and so forth may want to have a seat at the table as well.
It's so wild. You've got two major companies, major commissioners of movies and TV shows that are fairly hamstrung, and that has a ripple effect on the marketplace. So much to watch.
It's going to be really interesting, really interesting. One of the complainants on this is the Attorney General of Colorado, Phil Weiser, who I've known for years and is a seasoned antitrust attorney and is currently running for governor of Colorado and just won the primaries, and has done it on a platform that's entirely predicated on fighting the Trump administration. So I definitely feel some of the actors that are involved here have got the stomach for a somewhat more extenuated fight. It's conceivable you and I will be getting on to a call in 7 or 8 months to talk about an update.
Sounds like it could be potentially an HBO limited series somewhere down the road.
Almost as compelling as the podcast that I co-host, Beyond Unprecedented at Columbia Law School.
When do you release episodes?
We release episodes about 5 times a year. We just released a SWAT of episodes. You can find them on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Professor, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Nice to talk to you, Cynthia.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. The ESPY Awards are airing on ESPN on Wednesday night with Marcelo Hernandez as host. They're gathering at New York's Lincoln Center this time around after a few years in Los Angeles. Yes, indeed, it is time for second quarter media earnings. Netflix kicks things off as usual with its report on Thursday, July 16th. Go England! I can't wait to watch the World Cup semifinals game against Argentina on Wednesday at noon Pacific. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to my co-editor-in-chief Ramin Satuda and Variety's head of video Nick Stango. They've nabbed 2 Daytime Emmy Award nominations for Variety's great Actors on Actors series. The series is so good it was nommed for editions on 2 different networks. It was nommed for episodes that aired last year on PBS SoCal and for episodes that are available now on CNN through our new partnership with the All News Giant. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Gene Mattis. Stick, snick, sick pics. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.